Listen to this amazing story from the Psalms. When Israel fled from Egypt, leaving behind their years of bondage, something extraordinary happened. The sea took one look and fled in terror. The mighty Jordan River stopped flowing and backed away. Mountains skipped like playful rams and hills bounced around like little lambs. Can you imagine that? The very earth trembled at God's presence, as he turned rocks into pools of water and hard flint into flowing springs. This powerful image shows us how all of nature responds to its creator. Even the mightiest forces bow before him. It's a reminder that the same God who parted seas and moved mountains is still working wonders today. When you feel stuck or powerless, remember this psalm and the God who makes the impossible possible. Psalm 114:1-8 in the King James Version describes the miraculous events that occurred during Israel's exodus from Egypt, celebrating God's power and dominion. It recounts how nature itself obeyed God's commands, with the sea and Jordan River receding, mountains moving and water gushing from a rock. Verses 1-2. These verses establish the context of the Exodus, highlighting God's deliverance of Israel from Egypt and the establishment of Judah as his sanctuary. Verses 3-4. These verses describe the miraculous events that occurred as a result of God's presence, with the sea and Jordan River receding and the mountains moving. Verses 5-6. These verses reiterate the miraculous events, asking the sea and Jordan to explain their behavior, and the mountains and hills to explain their movements. Verse 7. This verse highlights the awe-inspiring nature of God's presence, with the earth being called to tremble before him. Verse 8. This verse recounts another miracle, God providing water for the people from a rock. The psalm calls for a recognition of God's power and an invitation to trust in him, even in the face of the world's chaos and difficulties. What does Psalm 114 teach us? Psalm 114 teaches about the power and sovereignty of God, his ability to deliver his people, and the awe-inspiring presence of God that can move even nature. It celebrates God's mighty acts like the Exodus from Egypt, and the natural world's response to his presence, urging a response of fear and reverence. God's power and sovereignty. The psalm highlights God's power to intervene in history and deliver his people, exemplified by the Exodus. It emphasizes that God's power is unmatched and that even nature trembles at his presence. The psalm teaches that all creation, including the mountains and the sea, acknowledges God's dominion and authority. God's deliverance and provision. Psalm 114 celebrates God's miraculous deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt, a significant event in their history. It also recounts God's provision of water from a rock during their journey in the desert, highlighting his sustaining power. This deliverance is a reminder of God's continued ability to provide for those who trust in him. 3. Awe and reverence. The psalm calls for a response of awe and reverence towards God, recognizing his power and greatness. It describes the natural world's response to God's presence, with the mountains dancing like sheep and the Jordan River reversing its flow. The psalm encourages humans to also respond with humility and fear, recognizing their place in God's creation. For application to today, Psalm 114 can be applied to the Christian faith, where the Exodus is seen as a type of our spiritual deliverance from sin through Christ. The psalm reminds Christians that God's power and presence are available to them, just as they were for Israel, encouraging them to trust in him. It also serves as a reminder of God's continued provision and the need for humility and reverence in the face of his power. What does it mean to sing praises to God? Singing praises to God means expressing admiration, gratitude, and love for God through music and song. It involves celebrating his greatness, remembering his actions, and acknowledging his presence. This practice is considered a way to invite God's presence, strengthen faith, and glorify Him. Psalm 114 is a song that reflects on God's powerful presence and actions during the Exodus. It highlights how the natural world responded to God's presence and how He miraculously provided for His people. The psalm reminds the Israelites of God's faithfulness and power, urging them to remember His past deliverance and trust in Him for the future. God's dominion. The psalm begins by stating that Judah became God's sanctuary and Israel His dominion, emphasizing that God's power and presence were seen in the nation's history. Nature's response. The psalm describes the natural world responding to God's presence with awe and trembling. The sea fled, the Jordan turned back, and the mountains moved like animals, showcasing God's authority over creation.